Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals, the podcast about interspecies communication. My name is Shannon Cutts. I am your friendly neighborhood hostess, along with Miss Petal Cutts, my 4-month-old cockatiel. And we are here today chatting about animal communication with today's guest, Karoline from Dog Mom Mentality with Layla, aka Princess Beauty. And we will explain a little bit more about that. We're here talking about how animal communication can complement other growth opportunities and how it can fit in with the bigger picture of being a pet guardian or a dog mom or a cat dad or wherever you find yourself in your relationships with your own companion animals, rescue animals, animals you work with. Welcome, Karoline.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here. We've had our actual communication session. You've been on my podcast recording, and now I'm here. So we've talked to each other a lot here recently.
And it's been so much fun, and I'm learning so much. I highly recommend heading over and adding Dog Mom Mentality to your playlist if you haven't already. It's an amazing podcast with so many resources and so much real world experience, especially if you have a dog who is in the least bit unresponsive to play or reactive or anxious in any way. You can just get so much support. That's what we've really been focusing for the last several episodes here on Let's Talk to Animals, is that feeling of impending doom or at the very least isolation or personal shame that you feel like, oh, my pet's broken. And it's like, well, let's talk about this.
Right. Yeah. You're not alone. Let's just say that you're definitely not alone. And that's actually how my podcast got started, because Layla was a difficult, reactive dog. And at the time, I felt very alone, isolated, misunderstood. I felt like I couldn't go and do my normal things. I just wanted to be a normal dog owner, walking their dog, but it just wasn't like that. And found this community on Instagram, at the time pretty small, but very mighty. You know, I finally felt like I was being heard. And I started the podcast because I was like, I want to show people the behind the scenes of reactive dog owners and all of the hard work, the emotional labor, the actual physical training that we do with our dog that other people might not realize or might not understand why we do it the way that we do. And I kind of got a bunch of different people from various aspects of aggression or fear or separation anxiety, just kind of a wide array, and started talking to them. Eventually turned it into this full-blown podcast that now covers any way that your dog can emotionally affect you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be reactive dog stories anymore, but that's still a really big piece of it.
And it's also interesting because our pets can be, and you and I talked about this in our session with Layla, but our pets can be very much some of the closest mirrors in our lives, holding a rather comfortable mirror up to show us some things that may be going on within us that we may not either be aware of, or we may not think they're problematic, or we may have just given up on those aspects of ourselves. And they can also be some of our most powerful mentors and teachers through modeling behaviors or just ways of being in this world that we can learn a ton from. You and I talked when we were chatting about what Layla had to say. We were talking about soul contracts and how there really isn't any accident. So if you're listening to this or you're watching this today and you're going, mine's broken, or how did I end up like this, or it's just not matching up with my vision, one thing I would really encourage you to consider, other than going over to dogmommentality.com, the other thing I would invite you to consider is that if you can imagine it, you can create it. And so it's already out there. Consider that this is your life knocking and inviting you out to play, maybe literally, definitely metaphorically, inviting you out to grow, to learn, to evolve, to transform, and that you and the particular animal you're keeping company with, whether for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, so to speak, is the perfect partner for that. Absolutely the perfect partner. I love Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 agreements, and one of the 4 is don't take anything personally. And so your dog has come into your life or your cat or your parrot or your turtle or whoever it is, they've come into your life as a part of their own. Look at her. If you're watching the video, she's got the four agreements right there. Don Miguel Ruiz, amazing, amazing, amazing. I follow him on Instagram. I've known about him through a mentor of mine for many years. Obviously, Karoline, you do as well. So highly recommended homework for you today, or play work, if you will. Just try on these four agreements for size. We can make the same mistake with our kids, anyone with whom we regularly encounter and engage in relationship with, that we take their behavior or their stuff personally as if it's a reflection of us. And in reality, your animal came to you already fully engaged in their own story. And their own stuff. So Karoline, I didn't really prep you for this, but I'm sorry about that. But I always love to invite our guests to take us back to the beginning, because I've come to know you and absolutely treasure who you are and your story and Layla's story. But our listeners, they may not know you and Layla at all yet. So can you just share a little bit about how you got to where you are today, and also how you became a little curious in adding animal communication to Layla's toolkit and your toolkit together? So just rewind us a little.
Yeah. So I love talking about this, and I kind of call it my dog mom phases, because I think about like the different stages that we went through. So my husband actually got Layla himself, and it was kind of like hey, I want to get a dog. We're dating, so like it's going to be our dog, but like, hey, I'll take care of it. I'll do all the potty training. I'll do the feeding, all of that. I was like, okay, great. At the time we were in college, and it was February of 2020. So we were in our senior year of college, and we lived separately. So the remaining college months, which would have been about 4 at the time, she was going to stay with him. She was going to be his dog. All good and dandy. Well, the next month, the pandemic hit. And so we all moved from college to my mom's house, and me, my husband, my boyfriend at the time, and Layla started to live there. And I started to grow kind of a connection with her, but it was a lot of like I'm the fun parent kind of thing. I'm just going to take pictures of her. She's just like going to be like a cute little asset. I had no intention on like having this big of a relationship with her. Growing up, I had dogs, but it was kind of the same. Like they were just there. I didn't have like a ton of connection with them. Never really been like a big animal person, if you want to know the truth. And so at that time, she was a puppy. We were doing like the cute sit, shake, like cute tricks, not a ton of like functional training, especially because the world was shut down. So she couldn't have a lot of the social training that puppies at that stage normally get. Fast forward a little bit, and she's in her like adolescent stage, which is like the 8 months to like 9 months to like a year-ish old. And that's the time that they're getting a little bit more rowdy, right? And, we didn't really do much of training. She was just kind of there all day. We just kind of coexisted. And my husband started to go for work trips where he would go for 1 to 2 weeks, and I would be the one responsible for Layla. He was also working at an office, and I worked from home. So I started to become more responsible for her. And you can blame this on whatever, but we got to this point where we had zero relationship. I was asking her to do things. I was taking her out and she wasn't listening to me, or I would ask her to get off the couch and she would just look at me. And it eventually got to this point that I would describe us as stepsisters living in the same house. So, stepsisters have like a really weird dynamic where it's like a power dynamic, and they're like a little bit like, am I allowed to cuss?
Absolutely.
Okay, they're like,
words around here.
Okay. They're like maybe a little bit bitchy to each other, like how stepsisters do, and they're like, I don't want to be here, but I'm here. That's kind of how me and Layla were, quite honestly. That's the best way that I can describe it. And so we ended up getting to this point that besides in the house, she was super fearful on walks. So we couldn't really take her out off of our street. And she started to have crate aggression, which was kind of the tipping point for us, because having a dog react towards you, bark at you, snarl at you, growl at you, snap at you, that's like a whole different experience. It's just like the lowest of low that you could get. I like in terms of like emotions from a dog owner's perspective. Awful. It was awful. So that was really the tipping point. And the time we were having these really hard conversations of like, what do we do? Do we rehome her? Do we try training? Like, how much do I want to be involved with in this? How much can my husband be involved with this? Like, what are we going to do? So we did we went through a few different trainers and we ended up finding a solution, or not a solution, but something to work towards, like a hopeful thing to work towards, right? And we were starting to get something under our belt to give us a little bit of confidence, like, okay, like maybe we can keep her, maybe we can work through this. I don't know how long it's going to take, but like all I want is for my dog to listen to me and to like be able to walk off of our street like a normal dog. So that was kind of like the first 2 to 3 phases of like us not really even liking each other to us being at the lowest of low because of her reactivity and behavioral issues. So then we started really getting into training, and I became obsessed with it. And it's part of the perfectionist in me and the people pleaser that I started to take her out, and I didn't want to look like a bad dog owner. I wanted everything to be precise, tight, managed, nothing wrong, so I wouldn't get blamed as the bad dog owner. It wouldn't be on me. And a lot of the times I saw her as a reflection of me and my work. And, I've always been a hardworking person, but at the same time, I've always been very independent. I was an only child growing up. So like I literally only depended on myself to get what I wanted and the outcome of things. I determined how well it was going to be. And so for her to be the first thing in my life that I put so much work into, but the outcome wasn't what I expected just because she's her own living, breathing thing was really, really hard on me. So we were making some progress with the training, but I was having a lot of judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of bad negative thought patterns. And not only about her, but about myself and about us as a team. And I eventually got to this point that we had come to so much progress, but I felt like we had hit a plateau. And that's where I really discovered play. And it's what made us just kind of get over that plateau, get over that hump. It really started to build that connection between us that I didn't even know that we needed, right? I was so worried about getting us to the point with training that she could walk beside me, not pull, not bark, not look at another dog, only look at me, all of the like quote unquote perfect dog things that I totally missed out on, like the actual, like, let's have fun, let loose, like, and be playful a little bit. This power of play, which I'm on a big kick right now because I'm doing this Play and Reflect 30-day challenge to encourage others to play with their dog and learn more about play. But throughout all of that, that really got us over the hump on this connection that we were really, really missing out on. And I was able to finally catch my breath a little bit and like able to like reflect and like look back on like everything that was happening and like be more aware to like make changes in the moment. And so from that point on, we're really at this stage now that like we're living the life that I envisioned. We're living the life that I had wanted, right? It can only go up from here, as long as we keep putting in like the consistent maintenance practice and training. She just totally exceeds my expectations every day now. And it's so amazing. But now, I have the time to focus on myself a little bit more, on other things. And like, yes, she's still a top priority for me. But whenever I was so worried about her training, I completely lost myself to that. It was like my whole identity was being this reactive dog mom. Like I had to take care of my dog. And now I'm in this phase where it's a little bit more chill with her. I'm in a very, very good place, but like I'm able to focus so much more on myself and explore other things that I am besides being a dog mom, which kind of leads into your second question, which was, how did I get into this animal communication? So one of the things that I've been exploring in the past year is this spirituality land, like this woo-woo land, like what's going on in this, holistic world, spiritual. And I'm in a mentorship program right now that has to do all about the spiritual and energetics of running your own business or being an entrepreneur. And all of the topics in it really, really interest me. And it's all about, taking care of yourself because you have to take care of yourself for your business to really thrive. And so in that, we really started to dive deeper into spirituality, holistic health, astrology, intuition, all of these things. And I was like, that's really cool. And my mentor had mentioned that she had done a pet communication session. It's like, that sounds right up my alley. Like, let's look into it. And I'm all about being more intentional, and anything that can bring me more awareness, like just sign me up, whether it's journaling, talking to somebody else, having them kind of be a mirror back at me. That's why I'm doing my mentorship program, being more intentional and intuitive with Layla, watching her movements, trying to see like what's going on there. And so I was like, sign me up for animal communication.
Mm-hmm.
So I was shopping around a little bit and I hadn't really found anybody that I liked. And then you popped into my inbox and I was like, perfect. This is such great timing. And so I decided to book a session with you, and now here we are.
And it's so cool. You touch on so many important facets of not only just what is possible. I mean, you literally right here in front of us, if you're listening or you're watching, you just heard the transformation that is possible and all of the wonderful perks that got added along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case, you and Layla have already transition through so many facets of your shared growth and evolution together before you added animal communication to your toolkit. In many cases, someone like me is where a frustrated, isolated, ashamed, anxious, or grieving pet parent will start. In either case, what I'm hearing from you is it added so much to your relationship, but it wasn't like the solution. I mean, sometimes it can be, but it's another wonderful opportunity to check something off your bucket list together. Mm-hmm. And also have an experience that will deepen your appreciation and just your awareness of the fullness of the other being's life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I love it if you'd shared a few of your aha moments from your session with Layla, because it is so interesting how you say my identity was wrapped up in Layla's behavior, and we were just focused on pretty much one aspect of our shared life together, which was making sure she did what I said when I said to do it.
Right.
And even in situations where it was very compelling for her to want to do something different, and kind of forgetting about all the other ways that you could experience one another. And I felt like your session with Layla, that she had a lot to say. And share about herself. And not all of it was a surprise or was new to you, but it was extremely affirming and confirming for you in many respects. So I would love it if you would share a little bit more about how the session has affected you and impacted how you've continued to interact with your sweet soul dog.
Right. Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because if I would have done this 2 years ago where we were still a little bit in the trenches, I don't know if I would have been open to something like this, open to hearing what you had to say. No, I think one thing about it is that like if you're going to do something like this, you have to like have your heart open to like receiving this information and like taking it in and filtering it a little bit. But then the other thing that I wanted to touch on is whenever I was so caught up in the behavioral side of it, making sure she's the perfect dog, quote unquote, so I'm the perfect dog owner. I just put so much pressure on us. It was like just constant pressure. And I think whenever we were talking about like the feedback loop and the soul contract during our session, we talked a lot about how if my anxiety and depression increases, her anxiety increases. And if my, mental health gets a little bit better, then hers gets a little bit better. It's not really a teeter-totter, right? Because if one goes up, the other one goes up. But it's like definitely this like feedback loop, right? And so whenever we were in this place that I was doing all the training, doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to be doing with her, it was still so pressure filled. And so my anxiety was still very much heightened. And I think that's one of the reasons that we had a plateau, that we weren't able to like get over the hump at some point. And it wasn't really until I let loose a little bit and was like, I'm gonna try something that I don't even know what it's gonna do, but like I'm gonna try playing with her. It sounds so simple to actually move around with her and be goofy and silly. And it literally does release endorphins and everything, right? But like it was so healing for me too, I think, just to like be goofy with her because, like I said, I was an only child growing up. And so I played by myself a lot. And I didn't have a little brother or sister to wrestle with. And now I'm out here wrestling and rolling around on the grass with Layla. So it's like a very healing aspect of it as well for me. You know, some of the other aha moments, or really like just affirming moments that we had during our session was she had the one thing that she said that I was like, I don't even know how anybody would know that. Like that's wild. It was absolutely crazy. It's kind of personal, so I'm not going to say it, but I just was like, I can't believe that came up, and it was so exact and direct with the soul contract and the anxiety going up and her anxiety going up. That was very like affirming. Like I very much had awareness of that, but then to hear it coming from you, from her, you know, it just was like, okay, this is the truth. Like this is how she interprets it as well. Some of the other things that really got me were the fact that she said that she loves being a canine ambassador. Like she loves knowing that she is part of the bigger mission. And I have this mission with Dog Mom Mentality, which is to increase emotional intelligence, empathy, and awareness and destigmatize mental health through the lens of dog ownership. And she, like the fact that she knows that she's a part of that was really, really, really cool to me. And it made my heart really, really happy. Let's see some of the other things.
And I want to pause there for just a moment because that's the kind of airy fairy thing where that gives animal communication its woo-woo reputation and in many ways gives folks who are on the fence or actively skeptical a reason not to even give it a seat at the table, not to even give it a chance. And yet when I shared that, you told me how much she loves the camera.
She does. It's like whenever you said that, I was like, you know, I never really considered that, but like she definitely does love the camera. She loves performing. You know what I mean? She loves being right there with me. And you know what? It might be because I have treats, but like it might just be because she knows she's part of something bigger.
Anything that provides any kind of affirmation and opens up even more playful, more inventive, more creative lens for you both. It's like if it sings to your heart and you see any evidence anywhere in your life that there's a shared resonance. And I think we talked a little bit about this on your podcast, and these episodes will be coming out at the same time. So as soon as yours goes live, I will definitely link to it in these show notes to make sure everybody can go over and hear more of the full story. But it's really cool to take a look through the lens of mental health and say, well, our fight, flight, freeze, tender, befriend system, the way that it's designed is to keep us alive, which means it's always going to default to what is the worst that can happen. And let's make sure that it doesn't. And then we'll just go ahead and mitigate the whole range in between. But from this higher place of more of the spirit focus and the intuitive focus, we get a chance to use our higher faculties, tap into these higher frequencies where we can imagine what is the best that could happen. And vision towards that. I also just love your awareness of the power of play. That sounds so cheesy, but it, you know, we see it all around us. It's the kinetic movement inherent in play that not only does it release endorphins, which is the best, that's the good stuff, but it also helps us shake off cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which is the silent killer, essentially the worst that can happen. And you see animals all the time, if they've been under stress, if they've had trauma, if they're anxious, you see them shake if they've been predated upon. If we have a lot of feral cats and they prey on some of the little birds out, and if they manage to escape, you'll see the little bird pick themselves up and shake their whole body and literally shake it off because they can't hold on to that shit and survive through another brunch or lunch or dinner rush. So giving our animals this opportunity, giving ourselves this opportunity to move our body. Yeah, we feel good, but what we don't realize is also we're literally exhausting the bad. We're reactivating our lymphatic system. Hey, get to work, move the garbage out of our system. And so that's the intuition at work. When you discover this, I feel like there's so much, and we talked about that you are intuitive, and I do tend to attract highly intuitive pet parents as well as highly sensitive pets. And we talked a lot more about that as well. It's just so many of your choices have been intuitive. And now it's just bringing more consciousness to that and beginning to really anchor into the trust in yourself, far from being the pet parent who's eating the shame sandwich for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like, this is the narrow way. This is the tough stuff that gets you to the really good stuff.
Right. And I was the person eating the eating the shame sandwich, the shame shit sandwich.
Yes, exactly. I know, because it was the really bad stuff that nobody wanted.
Right. I was that person. Like I definitely was putting pressure on her, but pressure on myself as well. Like, constantly it was, what am I doing wrong? Am I not strong enough? Am I not capable enough to be her owner? What I have found too, and part of the reason that I'm so just passionate about this is that I have mental health in my family. And so I've seen what it's like to be misunderstood with severe anxiety and depression. And I've seen it go from anxiety and depression, nobody's really supporting them, to very severe anxiety and depression and, other things. I've seen that. And so I just from the bottom of my heart don't want anybody to have to face that. I don't want anybody to have to feel that. I don't want anybody to have to see what I've seen from my perspective. And I know that these thoughts in one areas, even if it's as simple as dog ownership, that carries over. If I'm thinking about how I'm not capable with Layla, the next day I will think how I'm not capable of doing something at work, or how I'm not capable of giving good advice to a friend. That stuff carries. Like, you have to start working on it in one area of your life at least, and then it's going to carry over. You will notice those patterns.
And the other thing that's really interesting is that so often we do look at the cookie cutter advice has been, oh, you're anxious, oh, you're depressed, bring a pet into your life. It will add instant joy and instant upliftment. And it's like, oh yeah, and extra stress and
financial.
Financial and emotional, and you're adding another life story, building a symphony, and you've got an instrument that's out of tune, and you've got to stop everything, and you've got to work with that. And so it's really important to consider, is adding an animal to my world right now the next best step, or might it be that I just need to add some more nature to my world? I need to add some more green space to my world. I need to perhaps just hang out with some wild animals for a little while, or have a conversation. That's one of the things that really can be helpful about animal communication too, is this the right animal for me, or is this the right animal for me right now? I often wonder how it might change the relationship if introduced before there's that big commitment that's made. And of course, in your case, you weren't the one making the big commitment. It was your now husband.
Right. I mean, I was definitely there. He definitely was like, do you like this dog or this dog? And I swear, I don't even think I saw Layla like in a picture or anything before he got her. I wasn't even there whenever he got her, because I was visiting my mom where she lived at the time, which was an airplane ride away. So I wasn't there. Like, I didn't care to be involved. Now, did I help pay for her crate or her food? Yeah, like I will help do that. Or I did help do that at the beginning, but I wasn't signing up for anything but cute dog pictures, cute puppy pictures.
It's just so interesting to rewind and take a look at how it started, and how sometimes when we realize that we've got a really strong soul bond with another being, we may not, like you shared, you weren't necessarily what you'd consider to be an animal person going into this. And so sometimes they have to kind of sneak in the back door and they really surprise us. And yet, if you're listening to this right now, or you're watching this and you are struggling in your relationship with your animal, and you're thinking, what is my next step? I feel like changing the conversation to add that animal's voice to the mix and find out, what's going on for them and what ideas do they have. Let's say you and your husband were having an argument or a heated discussion over something, and you can easily hear one another. You can talk to one another. You can use the words that you both share in common. With animals, it can be tougher. It can be tougher to have those conversations. And we try in so many different ways. And you've had a lot of those conversations. You've worked with different trainers. You have worked with different mentors. You've created your own journal with prompts where pet parents that are frustrated or struggling can hopefully get in touch with what's going on. Has there been anything else that's crossed your path that has made you feel like you could really hear from Layla in the way that animal communication has done? Or has it all been just different aspects of having a conversation with her?
A lot of the things, we kind of already knew. It was that very affirming, confirming aspect of it, validation, right? One of the things that I asked you was, and this was a true question that I really needed to know the answer to, was, does she want or would she care if we added another dog to the family? And she said, heck no. And, we kind of thought 70% she's probably going to say no, 30% she might say yes. It was not a definite 50-50 split. It was more towards we don't think that she would want one, but we weren't sure. Right. And so I'm so glad that that was one of the questions that I asked and we got a definite answer. And now I know that's definitely what she wants. This week I've been dog sitting my best friend's little dog. He's 2. He'll be 3 in July, I think. And they've gotten along really, really well together. But yesterday, Layla and I had this moment where she just came to me for affection like she's never came to me for affection before. It was she's never had a pet in her life and she just crawled out of a dungeon or something. She was just so wanted to be next to me, couldn't get enough. And Sunny, who's the dog I'm sitting, was right there. And one of the things that we've had to work on so much in our training was her excitement and reactivity around other dogs. And, I thought, I don't know if I'll be able to have them together. Layla might be too much because he's just a 10-pound puppy or a 10-pound dog and she's 55, 60. She might be too much. And in this moment that she came to me and was just wanting all the love, couldn't get enough. I felt in that moment, I thought back to the question of would you want another dog? And in that time, I felt she was it was just coming up again. I was I know that she wants me all to herself. She's my girl. I'm so proud of her. And it was just kind of this thing of I want to spend this one-on-one time with her. I want more of that. And so, yeah, just after that and then asking you the exact question, I'm no, I don't want another dog anymore. Well, we'll stick with just Layla for now. That was one of the questions that I really didn't know the answer to. I had no idea what was going to come out of your mouth. And so, yeah, that was really, really great to know.
And it's very revealing because we have our very analytical, very logical reasons. And you and I talked about that for why we cook up these ideas.
Right.
And sometimes they're great ideas. And sometimes we have that conversation and we discover they really are heart-centric ideas, or there really is a way forward if that's really wanted. But in many cases, it's really just a function of our analytical, logical left brain lodging its way to a conclusion. We okay, well, what is adding another animal really going to add to Layla's life, to your life? Is this the only way to create an environment where this becomes possible?
Right.
And then just recognizing that it's not all about making sacrifices so that someone we love and have been working on a relationship with so diligently can have an enhanced experience of life with us. It's maybe they don't want that either.
Right.
Or maybe, as one of my intuitive teachers, Sonia Choquette, talks about, how good can you stand it? Because sometimes we're not comfortable with that level of joy and bliss and closeness. And so we actually work against what we're visioning for ourselves, what we really, really want, because we're afraid that we can't handle it. Or there's just nothing in our worldview and our frame of reference that said it could ever get this good. I didn't envision it to be this good. Like I was only seeing us get to about C-. I was never expecting A++. And so when it comes, we're like, oh, let me just add a little more chaos. Let me just,
It's a little bit self-sabotagey.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm continually just floored by and very inspired by is the amount of brave that it takes to have an authentic first person conversation with your animal. And I remember the days when I was hiring animal communicators and I waited with bated breath to hear the answers to questions like, what do you think are your food? Or is your habitat okay? And agonized when one of my reptiles said she wanted 2 pools instead of 1, and that would have taken up her whole habitat. We have to recognize there's so many layers to a conversation, and yet it's a negotiation as well. So coming into an animal communication conversation, it's easy to forget that we already know how to have conversations. We're just a little bit unaccustomed to having a third party translator present. A lot of the fear factor for people can be, well, what if my animal says they don't like me, or they don't like something in their environment, or they don't want something that I want?
Right. And, that's one of the things that I thought about, because I'm very open about our relationship used to really suck. And I recognize during those times that I was part of the problem. I put a lot of pressure on us. I made a ton of mistakes. And I thought about that before our session. I was like, I wonder if Layla's going to say something about like how she used to not like me either. It was kind of like a little bit like I had to prepare myself, because if I had heard that, I would have been very upset. Even though it was in the past, I still would have been upset. So like I did have to kind of prepare myself for that a little bit, because I knew that it could be a truth. Like it could come up.
And that's so important to hear, especially if you are listening right now or watching and you have never had this experience. One thing I can share to that point is that I have not found, unless there's a direct question involved from their person, I have not found animals to be too interested in talking about what has happened before. They're very present focused. And the other thing I can share, and I've had animals say things pretty bluntly, and yet there's always a note of kindness. And I'm thinking of one particular client whose soul dog passed, and he was struggling with a lot of guilt about some of his perceived shortcomings as a pet parent and some of the things that he felt hadn't gone right at the time. And when I talked with his soul dog, what she said was, you're the kind of person that I wanted to spend my whole life with, because when you know better, you do better. And that inspires me. You didn't know then, so of course you weren't doing it, but you understand now. And that's why you're asking these questions. I'm getting goosebumps because I can feel this.
I know. And it's making me tear up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And just so, yes, there can be an awareness of things that weren't perfect. I have yet to even find another human relationship where I can say, man, I nailed that one. Like I did everything right, but it's the way in which the animal views how everything unfolded. And so when they do share, you almost are glad that it didn't go well, because you grow like sniff, sniff, like there's like your heart. It's like, oh, I'll never forget that. I will go to my deathbed and I will remember that conversation.
Yeah, you had to have those tough times in order to really grow.
And the definition of love is to be able to see who's really in there past. At least this is my definition. I don't know how everybody defines it, but to be able to see past the person or the being's limitations to the essence of who they are. And that captured how his soul dog really saw him for who he is, for his heart, not for his learning curve.
Right.
And so that's an example, one of many, of how animals will respond. If in this particular case, there was a direct question involved as well. Are you mad at me because I didn't do fill in the blanks? I don't think that the dog would have shared anything about it. It would have even been interested to discuss it if it hadn't been for that direct question. And so animal communication can be its own healing process when we discover that there's more than one way to see ourselves and to see our growth. And there's beings in our life who willingly stay, who see us in so much of a higher and more unconditionally accepting place than we see ourselves. Yeah. That's why one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on the show here on Let's Talk to Animals is because I do feel like when the time is right to add these direct conversations with our animal companions to the mix, we will know.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that you were so aware and you were trusting yourself, and that even though there was this fear factor thing kind of going in, that you had built up enough self-trust currency, and you said, okay, now is a good time. Now is the right time, rather than just going up into the head again and going, well, does this make logical sense? Animal communication isn't about logic. We don't logic our way there. We heart our way there.
Yeah.
And yeah. And you've added so many other experiences into your life that you have really kind of paved the way for your own intuition to have a bigger seat at the table as well. So.
Yeah, this was a little bit of a treat for me, to do the animal communication session because, like I said, we aren't in the trenches. Layla isn't going through any kind of illness right now. And so I think typically like those are when people come to do an animal communication session.
Very much so.
Right. This was almost a little bit more like a treat, like a fun thing, and like maybe a little bit preventative for us to just keep me on my toes and keep me aware of things to look out for, things to appreciate. I mean, now every time that I go to post something, I literally think about how Layla said that she loves being a canine ambassador and being a part of something bigger, right? So it brings up a lot of little things in our day-to-day life now that just makes me smile.
It makes my day to hear it because preventative it's what I'm all about. And as I'm developing courses and new offerings for my clients who are becoming students of animal communication themselves, that dream of doing myself out of a job, because there's at least one person in every family who can serve in that role for the family as a whole, because it is definitely possible. And it is very much just like you don't want to let anything stew with your partner or your bestie or your boss or your coworkers. We don't want to let anything stew with our pets. We want to have that preventative conversation. And that's a skill set in and of itself. That would be a whole nother podcast, probably. There are so many beings in our life where we can practice being brave and discover that far from it being worse than we could imagine, it's better than we ever expected. So I really appreciate your taking the time to come on Let's Talk to Animals and share a little bit more, share about what it was like for you to have a session and to be able to talk with Layla and share some of the behind the scenes of how you prepared and your reasons, and just acknowledging you for being such an open book and being willing really to try everything that offers the promise of you and Layla discovering really how good can you stand it.
Right,
It sounds
totally.
like it's getting pretty darn good. So, Karoline, we are at the point in our show where I've mentioned it here and there throughout, but please tell us a little bit more about how our listeners and viewers can connect with you, especially if they're feeling a little isolated or a little overwhelmed or eating that very untasty sandwich we talked about.
Right.
And some of the resources that you have for them.
Yeah, so you can find me on all social media at Dog Mom Mentality. I'm primarily on Instagram, so if you want to message me, that's the place to do it. My website is dogmommentality.com. On there are a line of shirts that are inspired by being an empowered dog owner. There's little stories behind each of the shirts. And then there's also a journal. So the journal comes in spiral or are hardbound. It is comprised of 4 different sections: an intention setting section, a goal setting section. The actual beef of the journal is broken down into 10 common emotions dog owners face, from frustration to bravery to anxiety, alone, anything. And so they each have prompts with each emotion. And so that guided aspect of it really helps a lot of people that are new to journaling. But it's all from the eyes of a dog owner. So all of the questions, kind of relate back a little bit to the situation that you were going through with your dog. And then the last section of the journal is a wins tracker for you to just write down all of your wins, big and small. And then the last place that you can find me is on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. for the Dog Mom Mentality podcast.
I love this. And I love the wins because that gratitude. And it's also a way to really take a look from where you are now. And it's like, yeah, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe there's a little tweak that we could make here or there, maybe a big tweak. But shoot, wow, we're getting to the point where we are tweaking rather than, well, that didn't come out right. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The minor things, not the big things.
Exactly. And if you're listening in or you're watching and you're in the big things phase, I can't encourage you enough to connect up with Karoline and her community as well. And just really recognize that the animals that we keep company with are complex, highly evolved, intuitive, and empathic beings. And I truly, the more I do this work, the more I have come to not just believe, but experience that there are no accidents in who we cross paths with. So if you have been thinking to yourself, man, I wish there was somebody I could talk with or just vent to, or I just feel so alone, consider this a happy, not accident and an invitation to step out of the isolating shame and the shadows and into a supportive world of new friendships where you can really own that being partnered with any being of any species is a pretty big deal. Brave you. And let's get you some support and some encouragement so that you continue that journey, not just with a brave face, but with a brave heart. So Karoline, thank you again. I'll, of course, put all your links in the show notes and the link to the journal, but just absolutely delighted to have had a little window and a little spot in your life with Layla. Princess Beauty is an absolute delight. I just adore her, and what a gift to meet you. So thank you again. And for those of you who are listening or watching and you have found Let's Talk to Animals out of all the podcasts in the podcastosphere, and you are listening for the first time, or you're watching for the first time, welcome. We're so delighted to have you. Animal communication is no more or less woo than having a hunch or a vibe or an aha moment. And I invite you to continue your journey with us. We are releasing new episodes every 2 weeks this year for season 4 to give me a little more time to prepare and really dive in deep. We've got 3 amazing seasons before this one, and feel free to reach out either via your favorite streaming service, or you can always find us over at animallovelanguages.com/podcast. And that can get you wherever you need to go, or to reach out to me directly if that's your intention. I'd love to hear from you. So we'll be back with you in 2 weeks for a fresh new episode, and sending you and your interspecies family all of our love. Okay, bye for now.